Welcome back, everybody, to the Cancel for Maintenance podcast. If this is your first time joining us, we are a show that takes a behind-the-scenes look into the gritty, non-glamorous life of aircraft maintenance. We share some laughs, impart some wisdom, all in hopes of giving you that split-second relief in your day that can hopefully prevent a mishap. I am your co-host, Six.
I'm MVP.
And our third host, Shoreline, is here again in the back, silently monitoring our audio and making sure our faces stay fit for radio. We are joined once again by our return guest, Kora the Aviation Therapist. Welcome back.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me again. Happy to be here.
And thank you once again for coming back on the show. For those of you who are tuning into us for the very first time, Kora is a mental health specialist who aids those in the aviation community. She's also worked with law enforcement and veterans. Am I missing anything else?
Nope. Just a little bit of forensic background as well, but definitely knee deep in the aviation at the moment, which I love.
Oh, most definitely. And we actually appreciate that a lot because honestly, besides you, there's not a whole lot of aviation centric therapists out there.
Yeah.
Or that we know of, for that matter.
Oh, me either. Me either. I don't know many either. It's great business model.
In fact, for me, you're the only one that I know of. You know, that caters to this industry.
I found one in the South, and I wanted to reach out and do like a clinical internship with me. And he only asked me one thing after I reached out, and he was like, "Are you a pilot?" And I was like, "I'm working on my PPL," and then radio silence. So the only one I've been able to find, it's like, not unless you are a pilot. So there is someone in the South. I can't remember his name, but he is out there.
I guess why would it matter though?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, that says a lot about, where you're coming from, and I respect what you're doing, but message received loud and clear.
Right. So the holidays are coming up. My personal favorite holiday has came and went. Well, at least at the time of the release of this episode, it would have came and went. But with the holidays, though, while it's meant to be a season of happiness, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all those seasonal holidays in between, let's just admit it's not the reality for a good number of us, especially those in the service industry, such as aviation and mental health therapy and so forth. To it, there's a name for a depressive disorder that recurs surprisingly in line with the holiday season, which is SAD, S.A.D, or seasonal affective disorder, SAD. Yep. I mean, I gotta hand it to the person who coined that, or the group of people who coined that, because I don't know, it just seems like pure genius to me, like SAD.
Yeah, it's a very easy one. Like, doesn't take much. I love it, because when you're struggling, the last thing you want to do is critically think. So real easy to just be like, "Yep, I am sad."
Like, or I have sad, right? Like, I have the case of the
sad. I sad.
I has sad.
Yes.
So we've talked briefly a couple episodes before about SAD and how seasonal depression can just really hit you when you least expect it, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, it's one of those, like, you're in a funk and you don't know why, and it just so happens to be in one of the air quotes happier times of the year, and like everyone's having a good old time, or at least faking the funk of having a good old time, and seeing them at least try to live through it like it is happy, it just makes you even worse.
Yep.
Well, they say it's the most wonderful time of the year, but it sometimes doesn't feel that way. It could be maybe a multitude of things, okay, well, geez, I don't feel it's the wonderful time because I got to buy Christmas gifts for everyone and their brother. It's the end of the year and budgets are tight at work, and I don't know if I'm going to have to downsize my department or if I'm going to get the axe or whatever the case. Kora, in your experience, what's kind of been the common denominator when it comes to SAD?
Well, the seasonal affective disorder originates from, lack of sunshine. So it really does mean, less access to sun, and that's where it comes in as seasonal. Starting with that, especially in summer where we're generally, you combine sunshine and access to nature. I know up here, unless you're like really committed, it's cold and miserable, and I'm not that committed. So, most people don't spend as much time in nature as they do during summer. And so nature is a way of self-care, whether it's intentional or not. If you spend a minimum of 20 minutes outside, your brain is going to get the benefits from that, whether that's your intention or not. So one, we're inside more. Two, we're generally socializing less as well. So just on the basis of, not even including the holidays and what kind of emotions those things bring up, most people are socializing less and having what we call informal social interactions. So things such as, if it's a nice day outside and you have kids and you go to the same park, you might start to see the same other kids show up, and maybe your kids, get a bond with them, and you talk to the other parents, and while you might never call them and ask to hang out, those informal social interactions are so good for the brain. And obviously, as everyone's getting hunkered down, like you're saying, this preemptive stress, people are saving money, kind of going out less than they did in the summer. We still need those things as a human, and then take away the sunshine, that kind of leads to how any living creature would react, and it would be a little sad, less socializing and less sunshine, except maybe Floridians. I don't know, it's always usually sunny when I go down there, but in general, most of the population, that's kind of the impact that we see and where it originates from.
I never would have guessed that sunshine would be a key factor in all of this. And it likewise surprised me in a couple episodes before with yourself and two of our aviation dietitian friends, Jill and Alexis, that being like there's a certain time period where it's like prime sun exposure.
Yep.
I did not know that. Did not know that.
Yeah. And so obviously, as winter comes, and depending on your latitude in the world, so to speak, that window is going to shrink. So just being sure that if you are really capitalizing on that you might have to adjust the time a little bit depending on where the sun hits in your region. So yeah, that is a thing.
Now, going on, besides the sun exposure, do you think you kind of mentioned already with outside stressors? So like say like for us who are always on the line or going to and from airports with lots of windows or lots of open windows,
Yeah.
Do you think that contributes to it as well? Like kind of like I think the good only word I can think of is like people saturation, like you're oversaturated with people as you're commuting to and from. Does that contribute to SAD as well?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things can contribute to SAD, and SAD is what we would, probably classify as a mood disorder. And that mood disorder, from a mental health perspective, is usually any consistent mood or emotional state that you experience for more than 3 to 4 months. So, that could be if you are kind of on that cusp of burnout, and then, maybe you're not watching like, what's a summer sport people watch? I don't know. I'm a hockey person. But, maybe you're taking away some of those routines, and maybe you're like this close to not, kind of losing your shit or hitting that burnout wall, then that it's not going to take much to kind of, tip that over.
Huh. As you said, like what's a summer sport? Like, what is a summer sport? Baseball? I think baseball's a summer sport, right?
I don't know, swimming. I don't know.
Water polo, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry, everybody, if this is your thing. Like, I'm sorry. I think baseball is a summer sport. It sounds like it would be a summer sport.
I'm gonna say baseball. I've sat at baseball games like really hot, so I'm just gonna remember that. Like it's summer.
Yeah, the only sports I really know that comes around this time of year is football and basketball, but I think that basketball is like almost purely indoors. So like,
Yeah. Yep.
I think that could roll all year round for all we know, and I think it does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you have like DVR, you can play it all year round. Just don't tell yourself when it started, and you can watch a new game anytime you want.
Right. Or just be so stacked with work that, it just auto records on its own. And then you kind of have like a whole series if and when you do get a day off to catch up on it.
Yeah, binge watch. Yep. Exactly. Been there. Or hopefully you have a long flight or a long commute that you can download those and catch up.
Yep, absolutely. So for us, like for those service industries, I mean, that have to do there. Well, you kind of already said it already with having the burnout and coming onto that line. Does S.A.D stack up with other types of disorders or anxiety issues?
Yeah. So, you mentioned this is kind of a time where people are maybe seeing family or loved ones. And I think it's important to remember that for some people, that can be very like triggering or really activating for them. And then, like I said, if watching your summer sport or doing your summer activities were kind of that thing that's been keeping you even keel, and now that's gone, and now we're adding this other stress. And we kind of, like you were saying, this paint a picture of it's the most wonderful time of the year. Well, to anyone else, that's kind of saying if your family or your holidays aren't wonderful, then that's not Christmas, or, that's doesn't fit in this narrative. So I think, being more honest kind of with ourselves and within our social communities, even if it's not necessarily family, about, Christmas is stressful. I have to see these people. It's hard for me not to throttle them across the table. I need to take walks. Prior to that, I think that would really normalize. And I think we'd find out that a lot more people feel like that. But no one wants to be like the Grinch or like the deficit Debbie around, the holidays. Like no one wants to be that person. There's twinkly lights. But I think, being honest about that can really bring us together within different communities that might be a little bit not as traditional, such as, bloodlines or family ties.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Have you ever ran into somebody, or at least have you had in your experiences, have you ever seen someone where like they I want to say misdiagnosed, but they don't think that they have some kind of disorder like S.A.D. They just think like, okay, it's just a bad day, and they just keep trucking along, or and they try to fix it by means that just make the problem worse, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah. So definitely, whether it's like a misdiagnosis from themselves, whether, like they don't take it as seriously. I think also, working with men and women, symptoms for certain things look different. So I think right now, a lot of the popularized literature and information, for example, you mentioned depression. So I'm going to use that as a jumping off point. Most of the things that we think of in mainstream depression are going to be, isolation, staying in bed, lack of motivation. And that's largely true. But for folks, such as men or who have, higher levels of testosterone, one of the biggest symptoms of depression is actually irritability. And unfortunately, that kind of gets missed in a lot of the main dialogue around depression. So it's really easy if maybe you have a symptom that isn't as widely talked about, and then you're kind of just using the information you have. So if you're listening to this, I really encourage you to ask your therapist or your life coach or mental health professional, have you been trained to work with women? Have you been trained to work with men? Have you been trained to work with trans women or trans men, or, stuff like that? Because it really can be a difference of, chemical balance can show different symptoms in people. So if, you're looking or trying to figure that out, that might be a way to kind of narrow down results.
So you're saying my irritability is not because I'm not just irritable because I hate my boss. It's like it actually might be a symptom of something greater. Stop it.
Right. Yeah. So, especially symptoms that are deemed as like inconvenient, such as, irritability. It's like, oh, you're just, a grouchy man, or that's toxic masculinity. No, like, let's peel that back a little bit. Like, how long have you been, feeling like this? And obviously, if that's your only symptom, then maybe, let's bring in some more information. But if you have that as well as some other things, then, let's take a holistic approach. I also, really hesitate, especially with folks in the aviation industry on my end, from diagnosing people, because I know, if I'm sitting across from someone and, they are showing signs of depression in the aviation community, that can, ground someone or clip their wings. So I work from more of a, what are the symptoms of it, and working backwards from the symptoms rather than the diagnosis.
That just pretty much highlighted every single aircraft mechanic I know of. Like when you're saying like, oh, they're just irritable, or you're just a grumpy person. And it's like pretty much all of us all the time, every time. And when you were saying like, what makes you mad? What makes you irritable? And I'm starting to process a lot of this. Like, it's kind of like, what's the flavor of the day, right? That makes me mad.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I wake up mad and the day just kind of makes it worse.
Yeah. So, for example, another symptom that's more common with men with depression, because we're running with that, is like body pains and aches. That's not necessarily something that's super widely talked about. Thankfully, we are bringing in more of the somatic science and, the physiological sensations. But that can be another one. And that's something that when I'm meeting someone for the first time or trying to assess the acuteness of a situation with someone, I often ask, like, how does your body feel? Like, literally, like, not emotionally. Let's start with like a body scan. What are areas that tend to flare up? How often are they doing that? And that can also be another thing that, again, isn't as widely talked about, but thankfully it's hitting more streams, I guess.
Well, like what sort of common body part problems have you seen or heard?
Yeah, so a couple, like back pain, shoulder pain. I think we talked in like a previous episode, like digestion problems or tummy aches, increased heartburn, also migraines, headaches, trouble sleeping, a lot of things. The list is endless if you really think about it.
I feel like you're seeing through me right now. I'm just saying like all of the above.
And then, I don't know, maybe this is a little taboo, but, like sex drive and sexual function and sexual desire, kind of, monitoring that as well and asking about that can also, be one of the points that I cover with someone when we're kind of trying to assess the symptoms.
You know what else I've noticed is when you mention about go see a therapist, go see a life coach, go see a professional, especially in the aviation industry, they're very, and you said it already, where they have that fear of getting their wings clipped or getting put on the bench or grounded, or just not generally being able to do what they want to do or love to do. So that kind of makes them either A, hesitant to do it because they don't want to have their lifestyle in threat, or B, like they just feel like, oh, I don't want some shrink to just kind of unpack my head and start messing around with inside there and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So
which is fair. And, I will say, if you're listening and you're like, I don't feel like divulging every tiny detail, that is one of the ways. And for example, trauma, that can be a really good way to heal it. It's not what we call exposure. But for some other more mild things, we can talk about how to, like be resilient with it without you needing to tell me every nitty gritty detail. If you want to, of course you can. But therapy and mental health and psychology as a whole are kind of bringing in other ways of just like tell me everything from the day you were born until, the second you walked into my office, because that can be really triggering for people. And it's fair for someone to not want to tell a total stranger everything, especially if their livelihood is on the line. So I just want to say, if anyone's listening, there are like trained professionals that can get you several of the benefits that you could possibly have gotten from every little detail. And not everything not everything is curable through not saying everything, but there is a large number of things that can be addressed without, going line by line of every traumatic thing that's ever happened to you.
I agree. And I remember hearing some kind of rebuttal from a few mechanics in the past, or aviation specialists, both mechanics and pilots, where they say like, I don't need to see a shrink, or I don't need to see professional help because I have my homies, I got my friends, I have booze, I have cigarettes, I have guns, or whatever like high adrenaline-esque activity.
Yeah.
Which I agree is fair. Like, I mean, at that adrenaline rush sure will take your mind off it for like however long that event happens, right? But I personally would say like there's some of those coping mechanisms that might be both unhealthy to yourself and to your wallet.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. And to others around you too. I mean, that's always something in this economy, most of us are cohabitating with people. So, not checking that stuff can definitely, like, if you live with someone, make them upset. And then if you're a perceptive person, then you're also noticing that. And then it's probably a downward spiral.
Most definitely. I can fully attest, especially with the way things are going now. Like, what decisions you make now can like vastly affect you in the short and long run. So like say someone who's having SAD or any type of other issue coming into the holidays, what would be a way to encourage them to seek some sort of help?
Yeah. I always tell clients, future clients, past clients, like, ask questions. Like, you want to know if we're a good fit for you just as much as we want to know if I'm like, wait. Ask questions, because it's equally important that you like me, that I like you, and like my services can match what you're doing. So, asking people that you may know that have gone to folks, like mental health people. If you follow me on Instagram or, know my website, feel free to ask me. I always, tell folks that if you are seeing someone, really good questions to ask are, like I mentioned, how have you been trained to work with women or men or, LGBTQ populations or BIPOC populations? Those are questions that you're really allowed to ask. I like it when, clients can identify that. It's obviously never an expectation, but you have every right to ask questions for a service you're going to pay good money for, especially if you're one of the folks paying out of pocket instead of going through insurance due to, the diagnosis requirements from providers. And obviously that's a big no-no for folks in the industry. So, you wouldn't buy a pair of shoes without hopefully trying them on, or at least making sure they're the right size. Otherwise, you're going to have a pair of shoes that you tell yourself you're going to return, and they sit by your front door. Then 6 months go by and you're like, well, I can't return them anymore. And a year later, they're still there. That's what's going to happen.
Stop it. This may be a little triggering for some people, but I've noticed too, like around this time, especially around the holidays, this is where people start to up their awareness when it comes to more drastic measures like suicide or drunk driving, setting their houses on fire from turkey frying, stuff like that. And I get it with the genuine heart that some of these come through, but for like, say, someone who's experiencing some type of disorder where their emotions are not not the best, let's say that, and hearing those things coming out like, don't do suicide. Suicide is bad. Don't get into a fight with your significant other or spouse or loved one because it's bad, and this and that, right? So it's the message kind of gets lost, so to say, right? And and it kind of does the opposite, where instead of like making you feel encouraged to open up about potential harmful ideations, it kind of makes you want to do it more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but for anyone, listening, and maybe you're noticing someone, close to you is going through it, for lack of better words, in terms of how you can help in any, whether it's anxiety, depression, or any of those generally unpleasant feelings, it's a matter of like replacing like your energy in doing that. So instead of saying, well, just like don't be sad, say, hey, I'm going for a walk. Do you want to come with me? So right now I just want to emphasize of like, once you make the decision to, quote unquote, not be sad, it's not going to work unless you like do something different. And that might even mean like taking a walk or like picking up like a new show. And I'm just trying to think of like low energy things, because no one wants to learn like to play the piano when they're depressed or anything like that. But, even if it's something really small, trying to do something different. And if you're the person offering or suggesting any kind of help, do kind of the thinking for them and say, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you want to come? Or can I pick you something up? And kind of take the lead on suggestions, because it can be really hard for people that are like going through it. And you're like, let me know if you need anything. And they're like, I don't even know, other than like, eat, sleep, like defecate, like, I don't know. So the more you can kind of have options to choose from and take that like weight off of the person you're trying to help can be really helpful. On the same vein, I don't know if you're like headed this direction, but if you are maybe one of those people that are more prone to, SAD, kind of, doing the thinking prior to when that life is hard. I mean, most of us can say like, at this point, we're all adults, I'm assuming, unless there's like some really smart toddlers tuning in. But, we've all had enough holidays that we can generally say like, yeah, winters are kind of tough for me, or winters usually go by quick. So if you know that you're one of those people that's like grunt and bear it from October to, February, March, kind of do some of that thinking in the summertime and set yourself up for success in terms of, if you know that maybe like shopping for your hobby is hard and you don't like going to the store as much, maybe buy some more of whatever materials you have, like you will need down the line. Also, I encourage folks to make lists. I know it sounds so silly, but like making lists of things they like to do during the summer, because it can be really hard when you are in that like depression state to generate fun things to do. So if you can kind of capture and do the heavy lifting thinking on what you like to do, then that puts less pressure on your future self to come up with things that you like to do, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Mr. MVP, I remember you mentioned something about activities yourself. If you can like kind of refresh my memory about it, like some things you were mentioning or asking.
Man, caught me off guard because I kind of don't remember what we were talking about.
It was something about kind of like activities, right? I think it was something about activities and like what sort of things we can suggest. I think it was.
Oh, you mean things, read something or, to help overcome the SAD from crippling you, I guess, is there something, certain literature that people should read to better understand. For me specifically, recently with just dealing with the normal stresses that come with corporate culture, the Stoic philosophy has really helped me. Reading 2,000-year-old lectures by ancient Roman and Greek philosophers, it's kind of helped me to broaden my mind a little bit and learn how to handle 2023 corporate America. So for the sad part of it, is there something people could look into that could help broaden their spectrum, change their mindset about it, know what it is, but also to how to view it differently, right? And so instead of, okay, I'm sad, but instead of letting it consume me, if I change my viewpoints on it, and you can kind of recognize when things are happening, and you can then maybe help change your outcome.
Yeah. So in terms of books, should be more scholarly, and you're much more scholarly than me. I don't have any. Most of mine are like, let's divulge trauma. And if you're walking away like feeling happier after reading those, I don't know about it. But I guess in general, tips, the best tip I guess I can give for folks specifically in aviation. I know, many people, especially pilots and, folks that are learning on their feet and they're constantly moving their bodies in their jobs. Sometimes it can be really challenging when interventions that are suggested to you are just like, take away all like sensory input and sit still in a quiet room. That can be really hard for people. So if you find yourself, kind of thriving in that work environment where you are, running around and you're having to use your hands in combination with your brain, then starting with self-care there might not be the worst idea. Some people's brains are just built a little bit differently. So if I have someone that's like, I just, like when I take away all sensory inputs, it's really hard for me. Okay, so how can we self-care while still, kind of giving you those sensory inputs? So if you are one of those people that it was really hard to sit at a desk in school and book work was really hard, starting with how can I like self-soothe with all my senses? Because that is probably, the language your body knows. So starting with, exercise, obviously, like I'll say it, that sometimes is like the most unappealing thing if you're like depressed in bed. So maybe it might look like getting a blanket that's a slightly different texture than the one you normally have and feeling that, or, door dashing some food. I'm just trying to like think of like really low energy suggestions. Or if in the summertime, there's like I know there's lots of farmers markets, and if there's someone that sells candy that you can only get in the summertime or something, buying some to have during the winter, or having a little candy stash or something like that you can kind of bring yourself back through taste. Like look at animals like chipmunks and bears. They, kind of different, maybe not on a mental health perspective, but they eat a bunch of nuts and berries or, whatever. And so maybe as humans, we're just getting a little cocky of like, we don't need to prepare for winter.
Yeah, our preparation is different than stashing food to eat through the winter. Our preparation needs to be setting ourselves up for success with mental health, right?
Yes.
Like you mentioned earlier, a list. Hey, these are what I can do in the summer, but what can I do in the winter? And what's appealing? I've never skied before. Maybe I'm going to do that this winter. I'm going to, even if I only do it once, but it's something to look forward to and a goal to work towards. Yes. Or I'm going to winter camp. I've never camped in a snow before. Just different things.
Yeah, now, it might look like saving some extra money during the summer because, I don't know, I live near like mountains and winter sports are like prohibitively expensive. So if like all that's around me is mountains, I'm going to take a little bit of the money I would have spent during summer and do it there. Any person that flies or is in aviation, you don't send a pilot up without like an emergency checklist. So again, going back to like, we're really cocky to assume that like we can just go into life without kind of having, not necessarily a backup plan, but kind of a checklist of like, okay, what should I do now? Because the science definitely says that when you're triggered or activated or in one of those moods, critical thinking drops way low as far as like priorities in your brain. So the more critical thinking of like, what does Kora like to do on Saturdays when she's happy and healthy, and kind of writing a list. I tell clients, make a menu of things starting with your senses that you like. So maybe it's like, if starting with touch, maybe it's getting some fun like Play-Doh or thinking putty or fidget cubes. So then if you're kind of, stuck in a slump, you just pick up your little menu and you're like, okay, like let's start with touch. Okay, I have my putty or this blanket or this weird texture thing, or if you have like bubble wrap, something like that. All right, that didn't work. Let's go down the checklist. Taste. Okay, so I like Jolly Ranchers and I bought Jolly Ranchers earlier. Let's try that. Or a hot cocoa. Just literally you have 5 senses, make a menu of 3 to 5 things that you like for each one. Pull that out when you're not critically thinking the same way that you'd like to, especially when you're trying to get yourself out of a slump, and go from there. Similar to a checklist, if something went wrong on the flight line.
That's a really good point you mentioned there. And as you're saying all this and also MVP, as you're saying this, it kind of reminds me of this latest hobby that I've picked up on. And it actually kind of started with MVP with lore. MVP is the MVP when it comes to lore. And he really is. Like, I don't know how he retains it. He's like a steel trap when it comes to this stuff. And he tells it so lively that it makes me reenact it for myself, right? But I'm not that patient when it comes to reading. And as you're saying, like, you're one of those ones, like, I have to, like, those individuals who can shut off their senses and be totally fine. That's not me. I can't. I don't know what it is. I fidget. I have like basement autism or something like that, anyways, going back to it. So it started with the lore, and in understanding and living the lore, it kind of made me want to be meticulous in my own way, which kind of involves my hands and my eyes. And part of the lore involves having these little miniature models that kind of reenact bits and pieces of the lore. So what I've been doing is I started splurging a little more than I should on these little miniature models, and I would paint them in such a way where it kind of sort of mimics the lore, right?
Oh, that's cool.
And as you were saying, like it's stimulating, right? Like it gives me something to fidget with because it's really small, right? And if and when the critical thinking kicks in as I'm painting, then I can see like, oh, hey, that's pretty gratifying. It used to be gray, now it's bright red or something, right? And it's kind of like this childish impulse that comes through when you see color on things that are not, right? It sounds weird, but I'm telling you, like, at least for me anyway, like there's some very therapeutic stuff behind just having to meticulously focus on this or hyper focus on this tiny bubble. And at some point, like as I'm painting, I kind of just forget that I'm painting. I'm just kind of just like looking at it and like, there's color here. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then all the while, I'm like listening to something else, like some other podcast of people explaining a certain piece of lore that MVP mentioned, or I'm just listening to some kind of music or whatever. And what's funny enough is at least the moods that is being expressed as I'm listening to this, it kind of translates to the color, right? Like a lot of the lore that MVP has mentioned to me, and then some people recap, it's very grim, dark lore. And so like I've noticed it, at least when I start painting it and I'm listening to this grim, dark stuff, I come up with very darker colors.
Oh, that's funny. Like a visual manifestation.
Right. And I'm not thinking about it. I'm just like, this looks like it matches, right? And or like, this looks too bright. Let's just darken that down just a wee bit, make it seem more depressive and everything sucks. And, but I think that's just me in particular, because I'm very, when I'm let's say when I'm stressed or when I'm not feeling myself, I get real meticulous and I start fidgeting on things, right? I feel like I need to be productive and do something, but not so productive where I got to commit into something. Like I have to long-term plan this out.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's the case for a lot of people, where like they want to be productive, but they don't want to commit. So like what is, as you said, low energy enough that can curb this meticulous drive, but also be rewarding, like almost immediately, right? And it's for me itself, it was like this revelation discovery almost, where like color is a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to learn how to do this, and I see other people do it, and I'm just like, there's no way I'm gonna paint like that, just because like these models, for instance, like the largest one I've seen is about no larger than my thumb, and it's kind of like trying to draw a face on the ridges of your thumb, or at least like within the thumbprints.
Yeah.
So like this section is going to be a mountain, and this little section is going to be a village, and it's all like within the size of your thumb, which is pretty wild. That part kind of sort of drives me nuts, but it's usually around that time where I kind of just turn my brain off and just whatever happens. Yes. As MVP says, like, you just like Bob Ross, like happy accidents.
Oh yeah, happy little
happy trees.
Yeah.
There's no mistakes, only happy accidents.
Exactly.
I went on a rant. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, well, when I'm depressed, I don't like doing anything. I really encourage you to start with doing something you're good at. Can kind of get, like you just did such a good job of describing like the little pistons in your brain working through basically little problem solvings. How are you going to paint this? Based on maybe how you're feeling or what you're listening to. So if you're like, when I'm down in the dumps, nothing sounds fun, start with something that you're good at. And eventually like you are going to kind of get that same exact feeling, that kind of what you were just describing. So I just wanted to like throw that out there.
Appreciate that. And I think this is something MVP have talked about too. Like when we're feeling the most or the least of ourselves, that's when all the happy art happens, right? And I'm starting to really see a common factor there, especially with people with art, or like in MVP's case with woodworking, right? Like I'm not feeling myself, I'm gonna go build a garage.
Yeah.
and it's actually really good. If you've seen some of his stuff, like you made that like in the span of an hour, man. Like, yeah, no big deal. Like, what do you mean? What? And so that tracks with what Kora is saying. Everyone out there, like, when you're not feeling yourself, just start doing something that you're good at, and lo and behold, now you have some kind of art piece. Maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah, you'll at least maybe think of something else you'd rather be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I consider it like mowing the grass. You can see your progress. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yep.
What you're doing, and then as you get better, you can look back at the first thing you made or painted, and then look at what you currently made, and you can see, wow, I've really improved since then. And then that makes you feel good. You're like, okay, I am getting better. I might not see it because I'm doing it all the time, or I'm always with me, right?
Yeah.
But then you get that one time where somebody else shows up, or you send them a picture or something, they go, holy cow, that was you. And you're like, oh, it actually is semi-okay. Oh, okay. This is cool.
Yeah, we are definitely our own worst critics. Like we'd never talk to our loved ones the way we talk to ourselves.
Oh yeah. I mean, it'd be, instead of 50% of marriages end in divorce, it'd be 100% of marriages never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And so besides what we mentioned, is there any other tips that you can think of that where someone who's experiencing SAD or some other type of disorder, where like they can at least give some form of relief to themselves, kind of like self-help. I guess that's a way to ask.
Well, if I could jump in here real quick, and sorry to cut you off, Cora, because you're the professional, but early on in the episode, you mentioned, nobody talks about the aches and pains that come along with this, and nobody has these discussions. And I think, a lot of the sad is, and probably a lot of people can say that they felt the same way, but there's a feeling of aloneness. Even if you have a family or a significant other or a group of close-knit friends, you can still feel alone because life happens and it gets you into a certain headspace, and nobody really talks about it. You don't really bring it up to your friends or family or whatever, and even if they ask, hey, what's going on, and it almost feels that those are hollow questions. They don't.
Yeah.
Nobody really cares how you're doing. It's just the acceptable response is fine or great. There's no other way to answer that in a truthful manner, because at the end of the day, they don't want to be burdened with your problems. And at some point, right, most people realize that nobody cares about their problems, so they clam up. Oh, how you doing? Fine. Even if your world's on fire, the answer is fine.
Yeah.
And if what am I trying to say here? You just realize that nobody cares. So then you start becoming bitter along with that sadness. Fine, nobody cares about me. I don't care about anyone else. And subsequently, you alienate yourself further, driving yourself further into that. SAD becomes depression.
Yeah.
A more severe realm of it. Sometimes you can't get out of. So we don't have enough people who genuinely care when to listen and be genuine when you ask, hey, how are you doing? Because, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, but I'm kind of an empath. I feel what others feel, and I can tell when something's off, and I'll say, hey, how are you doing today? And they're like, oh, fine. And I always go back, no, how are you really feeling? And then they'll open up a little bit more. And they might not totally open up to you in that instance, but a few more times like that, and they go, oh, here's somebody I can confide in. And if all you have to do is sit there for 10 minutes or however long and listen to their story, that's sometimes all they need. They just needed somebody to know. They don't want you to maybe solve anything. They just want somebody to know that not everything is good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think to what you're saying, like, sometimes we don't give people the opportunity to give us, to care about us. And just because maybe the first or second person was a jerk or was just not seem to care, not to belittle what people go through, but kind of, trying again in different contexts, obviously, that you feel safe, but also it can be really beneficial to still surround yourself with those people, even if you don't want to talk about it. And for some people, they don't want to talk about it, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're, kind of struggling, and to kind of tie it to a statistic, one of the biggest determinants of PTSD, for example, after a traumatic event is the social interactions that the person who is traumatized has immediately after. And what the science says is you don't even need to talk about the trauma, but if you can just be around people who genuinely care about you, and you're still getting those positive, I hate to say unironically vibes from people and feeling cared for, that's still going to really have a positive impact. So if you don't feel comfortable sharing, I still encourage you to reach out to people who make you feel good about being a human, and no pressure to talk about whatever that thing is, and know that you're still going to get a benefit from still seeing those people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've all ran into this where somebody's like, hey, how you doing today? And you're like, oh, well, actually, and you kind of they were going to continue walking, and then they kind of stop and look at you like, "Oh, you son of a! You're actually going to tell me, huh?" And you look at their face, and you can see the genuine. You're like, "Yeah, this and that." And you look at their face, and you see the genuine, like, lack of care in there. Like you're inconveniencing them. So you pause and you go, anyways, I'm good, all good. And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool," and they move on. And you're like, "All right, well, you know."
Yeah, definitely don't tell everyone.
Right.
Use your own discretion. And that's kind of where I say, like, if you have people, go for it.
Well, I was going to say, where I was going to go with that is speaking for myself, I've done that with people before who I thought, just from other interactions would genuinely, somebody you could open up to for a few minutes, right? That they would show genuine interest in you as a human, as you said. But when then they give that same like, "Oh, you mother, you're gonna slow me down, huh?" Mm-hmm. And so I think in those cases, it can also make you even feel more alienated because you're like, that is somebody that I thought could, but in fact, it's they don't care. So then you're going, my circle of people I thought I could talk to just got a little bit smaller. And unfortunately, you're going to have to whittle that down, but eventually you'll get to a solid group of people that you could call at any point in time, and they'd be on the phone with you 5 minutes to 5 hours, whatever the case,
Yeah, and I think, asking if you are trying to figure out like where is this person, I think that has a lot of power in like self-care for both ends, is kind of like, "Hey, like, how's your day going? Oh, it's been a doozy. Do you have a second?" Or like, "How much do you want to know?" Or just kind of offering and giving them a choice, because we never know what, our colleagues or even sometimes our loved ones are going through. So I think it's unfair to totally write someone off, just based on one interaction, especially if you're not necessarily giving that person the choice. But if it is one of those people, they might be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I got to go to this meeting, but why don't we grab lunch later? And so, it might be less of you being an inconvenience, but more of just like, they can't at that moment. So I think, offering the person like, "Do you have a minute? Can I tell you?" Or.
Yeah. So then it comes down to the positive communication, right? "Hey, do you have a few minutes? Actually, I don't right now, but I will circle back with you."
Yeah. Or
at
like
some time,
go for it.
I was going to say, but don't just say, "I'll get back with you at some point," because that's very open-ended. And that also seems like, okay, well, that's the end of that conversation. But just say, "Hey, I actually have a meeting. It's over at noon, though. Can we tag up at 12:30?
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to touch on, you mentioned, earlier about coming up with suggestions. And so sometimes maybe you need to be a little direct, right? You see somebody at their desk and they're kind of, you can tell it's been a day before they even got to work.
Yes.
And so every little thing is they're getting more frustrated and this and that, kind of head in the hands. You say, "Hey, let's go take a walk." "No, I can't." And you kind of go, "No, we're going to go take a walk for 10 minutes. We're going to come right back. Don't worry about it." And just getting them out of that environment and then doing a little walk and talk. Sometimes that's all people need to just kind of reset for a second too,
Yeah.
So be definitely a little, I was wondering, I was going to ask you, is it cool to be a little forceful in that kind of a situation? Like, "Hey, let's go take a walk." "No, I can't." "No, we got 10 minutes. We can go take a walk. Let's go."
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously there's a difference between like someone, like if you have a coworker or something that when they are generally stressed, you see them walking around or taking a break like that, or, like if someone smokes cigs, maybe inviting them to like, "Hey, you want to, take our smoke break together," or something like that. And that, obviously takes some time to get to know people you work with, to know kind of their signs, I guess, of, how they relax. So if for example, like if your coworker is having a bad day, they get like a big old frappuccino with chocolate and sprinkles and whipped cream, then, you might come up to them and say like, hey, do you want a Frappuccino? Or going that next step. And, obviously it's a gamble, but showing up with a Frappuccino or something like that, or offering, hey, I have an extra, cigarette. Do you want to come smoke it? Kind of making that like invitation to them. And then also, respecting if they say no, but you're more likely to get a yes if you kind of offer something that's specific to them. So
that's so funny. It says, if you're hungry, grab a Snickers, or you're not you and you're hungry, grab a Snickers or whatever. I had a coworker not too long ago, and I could, I could tell by tone of voice and body language when she was having a less than adequate day. And I always knew that Snickers bars were her favorite. So I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm going to be right back, whatever. And I'd just go down the hall to the vending machine, grab some Snickers, and then I would come back, and then she might not be at her desk, or I'd wait till she wasn't at her desk, and I'd just leave them next to the computer, and then I'd disappear. And then I'd always get a message like, oh, thank you so much for the Snickers. That really helped me get through the afternoon, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just little things like that, right? That I think it just helps to know that everybody's human, right? And treat them as human. Yeah, you don't have to give them all your time and attention, but acknowledge their existence. In fact, my Skype picture on one of the computers I work at, on one of the networks I work on, the Skype picture is a robot, and it says, "Am I real?" And that's up there. It's been up there for a while.
That's funny. Yeah, making connection, or noticing if someone has like a sticker on like their cart or their desk, or their workbook or something, like commenting on that. If you don't know how to help, just kind of generating what we call like positive emotions. So yeah, that's another approach too. If you're like, what they're going through is like really personal, how do I still make them like feel good, after our conversation, asking like, hey, that's a cool sticker I've noticed that you have on like your toolkit or on your book. Like, what's that about? Or, doing research and asking some questions of like, oh, is that this thing from this other thing? So yeah, if you don't know how to generate positive emotions, asking questions that generate like a guaranteed positive answer, like what was like the best food you ate this weekend, or what was the highlight of your time off, or something like that. Is usually a good way to like help somebody out without being like, tell me all your deepest and most personal issues right now.
You know what I always do that to take the edge off it, and to just start a conversation, but take their mind off of whatever is ailing them at the moment. My question always is, and I ask it to a lot of people on a daily basis, hey, what's for dinner tonight? One, because it starts getting them thinking about, after work hours, and then they go, oh, well, that's a good question. Actually, I've been in the mood for this, and blah, and then just you can say, oh, you're in the mood for that. Well, actually, I got dinner from here that serves that, and it's really good. XYZ, you should try it, and also it gives me ideas, because maybe I don't know what's for dinner, and then they say something like, I'm getting that too, But that's my kind of daily icebreaker with people is like, hey, what's for dinner tonight? Oh, well, I hadn't really thought about it, but, and then I think that it gets them thinking about food, because we all like food, and just, it's a nice 5-second distraction from whatever else they're doing.
Yep. Food is very linked to like attachment. So I was going to say another thing is, if you don't know how to help someone, food is always something that makes people feel good. Unless they're like allergic to something and like all you have is what they're allergic to, then maybe don't do that. But
hey, I'm allergic to peanuts, but here's a payday. That's all I got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Here, you want this sandwich I made you?
Gee, well, dang. Speaking of that, I've noticed, or at least with dealing with some individuals who have some form of neurodivergence, is asking the typical question that which we probably all generationally grown up with is, how are you doing? Right? It seems very harmless to most people, but I've noticed, especially with people with some kind of neurodivergence like ADHD and autism and stuff, you say how you're doing and they mentally collapse.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice that at first. I just kind of see this person like, it's almost like a 180 turn. Like their day was sufferable but manageable, and then you say, how are you doing? And then that was like the straw that broke the horse's back, and you could just see them internally shut down, like, well, this was a great conversation. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And it's like, at that point, it's like almost unsalvageable at that moment. So instead of saying, how are you doing? What would be a good, positive, approachable example to ask someone besides what we're having for dinner?
Yeah, like say if you're running into someone, I usually ask like, how is traffic? That's kind of like people will be like, oh, it was like so easy and I got a lot of green lights, versus like, you will not believe I got stuck behind a Prius and then a bus. And you can kind of like, without necessarily being like, tell me how you feel and sound like Mr. Rogers, you can kind of learn a lot about how someone's day has started based on their commute to work. So like, hey, how was traffic, or how was the drive out here, is a more neutral question to ask, but still can give you kind of an indication of where they are emotionally. Same with like, how, what was the highlight of the day after work that you had, stuff like that. Or if they're, I don't know, like sometimes I just ask like, what are you looking forward to right now? Someone can say like the candy bar in my lunch bag, or I just booked a trip to, I don't know, Maine, and I'm going to eat some lobsters. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So kind of asking things that guarantee a positive answer or are a little more mild, like, how was breakfast? Someone might say like, oh, I had a breakfast sandwich and I stopped at Starbucks on the way. Or like, I'm hungover and I ate a bagel and I threw it up. Like, those tell you two very different things about the type of morning someone might be having.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there at some point, right? Like,
yes.
Like the throw up bagel, or like, I just like, what was your meal today? I had a coffee. Oh,
yeah, I had Advil.
Fantastic. It's going to be a great day. Monday day X.
Yeah.
So someone having SAD, or someone's having the holiday blues, so to say, what's a good way for self-help, before like they see it come in, or they realize it enough to know that it's starting to become a problem, or they see the season coming, like, okay, they have seasonal dread.
Yeah.
What's one way to self-help, or what are some ways?
Yeah. So kind of putting something intentionally like in your calendar to look forward to. So maybe it's like you live in Southern California and you're like, I'm going to hit up like a theme park. So I'm going to, put in, request a day off, buy my tickets, and it's in the calendar. Maybe going to bring my family and they all know, and we're all excited about this as a family. Or maybe it's, I'm going to take a secret day off and I'm not going to tell anyone except for my boss. And so you have, something to look forward to. Maybe it's looking into what bands or artists are coming into your town and maybe trying to find shows that are happening. If you get the winter blues, maybe like a nice December, November, January show. And then again, kind of just like reminding yourself, like, I know this sounds silly, but like what you're capable of and your accomplishments. I know it can seem like a lot harder to do things when your days are maybe only 6 to 8 hours of sunshine, or if you live in colder places, even shorter. So just kind of doing the heavy lifting of like, I am still a capable human, even when the sun isn't shining. And then just like give yourself permission to like eat the food you like, take a day off. Even if you don't tell anyone, I know that can be kind of hard for some folks and not always attainable. Or, buy yourself something. Sometimes I'll tell clients to like bet with yourself that something bad happens. And if that bad thing happens, then like buy that thing in your Amazon cart, or order that $6 coffee, or get the McDonald's breakfast, whatever makes you happy, and just give yourself permission. I know this sounds silly, but like to be gluttonous, like, kind of overcompensate. I mean, bears do it and they're fat and happy when they crawl into their nests at the start of winter. So, whatever you can kind of do to set yourself up to not have to critically think as much, because that goes down when you're in your feelings. And then, make plans with friends. Again, even if you don't want to talk about how shitty it is that you're eating a frozen dinner in your apartment alone on Christmas, hang out with people around then. And, if it's one of those things, like if you don't want to just sit around and talk about the holidays, maybe plan like axe throwing or like go-karts if you live in a place that's sunny, or things that are a little bit different than what you normally do, but are still fun.
I'm glad you
friends of mine from back home in the wintertime, they plan a guys trip every winter. So it's something to look forward to.
Exactly.
I've never been invited to it, but I know that they do it. It is what it is.
I'm also glad you mentioned the add to cart part.
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing this like memes galore, or like, what do we do when we're sad? Add to cart. No.
By now. Yeah.
What they call retail therapy.
Yes.
Yep.
It's a thing. And I'm starting to love it.
I'm guilty of it, because as we were sitting here talking, one of my orders showed up on the front door.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, so now I get to go fix a radio that I haven't used in 20 years.
Hey. Oh. And one of mine just said, like, your order has shipped. Yes.
Love that. Get that serotonin flowing.
Yes, absolutely. So that's definitely one. Add to cart is definitely a thing. Your wallet may hate you later, but I mean, obviously don't splurge too crazy, but little here's and there's work, right?
Yeah. Or like stop and get that McDonald's on the way home, get that milkshake, or, like maybe in the winter you say, when I eat dinner, I'm going to have a cookie too, or do something that's a little like, I don't know, like I hesitate to say frivolous, but maybe leaning more towards gluttonous, and just like enjoy it.
Add that little razzle dazzle into your day.
Well, I don't know if I've said this on here before, but I used to deploy with a guy back in the day, and when you're deployed, kind of all you do is gym, work, sleep, repeat, and typically what people try to do over there is lose as much weight as they can, so when they get home, they look good for their families or whatever. But one day we were standing in the chow hall, and I was looking at a slice of pie. And then I started walking away, and he comes up behind me and goes, "What are you doing? Get that pie." I said, "Oh, I don't need it." He goes, "Hey man, you got to live." Yeah. He goes, "Look where we're at." He goes, "We could all die tomorrow. You got to live.
Eat that pie."
And so I think about that a lot. I think about that saying a lot.
Eat that pie.
Hey, you got to live.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was eat that pie. I'm sorry.
That pie. You got to live. Those are synonymous.
It should. That totally reminds me of all the times we said that you want to eat. Just go ahead, eat it. Do it, man. Yeah. You deserve it. That's what it was. Like, you deserve it. I'm probably like the worst when it comes to that, because when someone's teetering on that line, we're like, I don't know about adding to cart. It was like, do it, bro. Christmas yourself. You deserve it. And
remember Donna and
Parks and Rec.
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself. Yes, exactly. That's what it was. I'm terrible. So like, if you guys have me as a shopping partner, you're going to be splurging a lot more than you should, because I'm terrible. Do it, man. Splurge. You deserve it. It's not going to be there tomorrow. The sale ends today. Just do it.
Exactly.
It's the last one. It's the last one. So, see, what's going to happen is you're going to not do it because you feel guilty. Then you're going to, the whole drive home, you're going to feel bad that you didn't do it. And then you're going to change your mind, come back. At that point, someone else already got it. And then you're going to hate yourself because you missed an opportunity.
Exactly.
Seize the day, man. Carpe diem.
Go carpe all them diems.
Seize the carp.
Can't be sad if you're carpeting all them DMs.
Damn. Get it. Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. MVP?
No, not at this time. I think I got in a couple of questions that I wanted, and I appreciate Kora giving her professional explanations.
Thank you.
Miss Kora, anything else you'd like to say for us or the audience outside?
No, other than, check in with each other. Send memes to your friends you haven't talked to in a while. See how they're doing. You're probably not the only one like struggling. And go indulge. Buy that thing. Eat that cake. Eat the pie. Yeah, I think Jill, if our nutritionist friend were here, she'd also say, eat the cake, eat the pie.
You gotta
Enjoy it.
live. You know, you mentioned memes. Find some lore to get into and memes, and just send those back and forth to your friends, because that's literally what Six and I do all day.
Good for mental health. Memes are good for mental health.
Yeah, that's actually that's a science. Yeah,
it is a science. Yeah.
Memes is a mental health science now. Hell yeah.
Yeah, there are scholarly articles.
Look it up. Google it. It's worth the Google. Try it. And also, I mean, if any of you guys are into role play, or like not that kind of role play, but if you're into like games or explore, doing some lore exploration, like how we did with Fun Facts with Max or Airplane Facts with Max, there's all sorts of like gatherings where like you don't have to be socially present or physically present to socialize. There's like D&D, there's online games, there's tabletops, all sorts of ways. Like, it kind of gives you that thing that you're still safe in your bubble, but you're still getting out there, so to speak, right?
Yeah, definitely. Online communities are a great place to be a part of, and you can do it from the comfort of your own home.
Yes, I'm starting to become an advocate of journaling too. If all else fails, like if you want to be alone with your thoughts, but not that alone, then take up some journaling. That might be the one to kind of help you like reassess and help yourself. But hey, let us know what you guys think. What sort of things that help you combat SAD or the holiday blues? What sort of suggestions do you guys have? What sort of methods have you tried that worked or didn't work? And what sort of online communities are out there for you? Let us know in the comments. Let us know on our social medias, our website. The absolute best way to get a hold of us is on our Discord channel via Patreon. And before I forget, if you are feeling so sad, so to say, or the holiday blues is starting to get the better of you, please reach out to some professional help, some professional resources. They are very well trained to help you through these issues, or at least help you unpack the things that are aggravating these issues. Kora, our guest, is definitely one of the best ones out there. You can find her at her Instagram at Th.AIR Aviation Therapist, or you could also check her out on her website. Kora, can you please remind us again what that is?
Yeah, for sure. Flightdeckcommunity.com. And then I'd also like to throw out Th.AIR.apy. It's a peer-to-peer support network that was founded for flight attendants, but now it encompasses all aviation professionals. So if you're kind of in that spot where you're like, I want to talk to someone, but maybe not someone who's not in the industry, that's a really good resource as well.
Most definitely. And Th.AIR.apy is actually reaching out to expand to all facets of aviation. So, I mean, if it's not there, it's getting there.
Yep.
But by all means, please reach out to these professional resources. And it can be completely anonymous. You don't have to tell your friends that you're going through it. Whichever way is the most comfortable for you. Hey, on that note, everyone, we thank you all for listening. Ms. Kora, thank you again for joining us. And we will see you all again on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. We would like to take this time to thank our patrons for supporting our show and allowing us to make episodes, maintain our gear, and create merch for all of our listeners. With special thanks to Erica Lamont, Chris Hawkins, Eric Shaw, Dan Schubert, Ryan Frushauer, Kyle Keir, Mike Sherwood, Caleb Stockhill, and Jennifer Brofer. Thank you all so much for your support and patronage. If you like our show, please support us on Patreon. You'll receive awesome perks like access to our private Discord, discounts and early access to our merch, first glimpse of our comics and other projects, and so much more. You can further support us and show off your prowess as an aircraft specialist by visiting our shop at cancelformaintenance.com. If you like classy or rugged watches, visit our affiliate Rockwell Time at rockwelltime.com. Use the code CX, the number 4MX to save 10% off your total order. If you have suggestions for the show or you'd like to be a guest on the show, send us a line on our contact us section at cancelformaintenance.com, and we'll do what we can to get both your ideas and yourself on the show. Please support us on social media like Facebook at Cancel for Maintenance, Instagram at CANX for Maintenance Podcast, or Twitter at CXMX Podcast. Please check out our new comic series on the Tapas app. Like, share, subscribe, and comment on our comics. Let us know what you think. Thank you all so much for your support and listenership, and we will catch you all next time.